Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling one of the most talked about, and I'd say one of the most misunderstood chemicals in the human body, dopamine.
It really is. It's sort of the celebrity molecule of the neurochemical world, isn't it?
It is.
Most people, they instantly equate dopamine with this rush of pure pleasure, like a reward hit when you win a game or a bite into a chocolate bar.
Exactly. That's the common perception, the pleasure chemical idea. But our sources today, they show that dopamine's real job is, well, it's far more nuanced, it's more powerful, and frankly, much more surprising than just simple pleasure. It seems to be less about the feeling of the reward and so much more about the drive to get it.
That's the key. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to try and redefine dopamine for you.
Okay.
We'll start with its molecular origins, the basics.
Okay.
And then we'll follow its complex pathways through the central nervous system, where it controls action, motivation, learning, and then explore its totally separate independent roles throughout the rest of the body.
Which are just as vital, right? Regulating everything from your blood pressure to how you expel salt.
Absolutely.
So let's start at the very beginning, a fundamental definition.
Yeah.
What exactly is this molecule?
Right. At its absolute foundation, dopamine, or DA, you'll probably hear us say that a lot, it's a key neuromodulatory molecule.
Neuromodulator.
Yeah. It's an organic chemical, and it belongs to two specific chemical families.
Yeah.
The catecholamines and the phenethylamines. Now, inside the brain, it's a critical neurotransmitter.
A messenger.
A rapid chemical messenger, yeah. But outside the brain, and this is just as fascinating, it acts as what we call a paracrine messenger.
Which is like a local hormone.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It influences cells that are just nearby in its immediate vicinity.
Okay, so to really understand its big system-wide effects, we have to start small. Molecular level, what is this thing built from?
Well, it has a beautifully simple structure, which you often find with really powerful biological molecules. It is the simplest of all the catecholamines.
Well, what does that mean, a catecholamine?
It means it has a catechol structure. So think of a 6-carbon benzene ring, and on that ring are 2 hydroxyl groups. That's paired with a little ethylamine chain.
And you mentioned it's also a phenethylamine.
Right. And that family is, well, it's notable. It includes a lot of powerful psychoactive substances. So that underlying structure alone tells you you're dealing with a potent molecule.
That simplicity is kind of deceptive then.
It absolutely is. But
Yeah.
because it's so simple, our body knows exactly how to make it.
Okay, so let's get into the manufacturing process, the synthesis. Where do the building blocks even come from?
The process starts with the amino acid L-tyrosine.
Right.
L-tyrosine is. It's a non-essential amino acid. So our body can make some of it, but we also get it from pretty much any protein-rich food we eat.
So it's readily available.
Very. And the pathway is pretty straightforward. L-tyrosine gets converted into L-dopa, or levodopa, and then that L-dopa is converted directly into dopamine.
And this precursor pathway, it brings us right to one of the most critical facts, especially for medicine, the blood-brain barrier.
At this point, you just can't overstate it. Dopamine itself is physically incapable of crossing the blood-brain barrier.
The BBB.
The BBB. It's a selective membrane that, shields the brain from what's circulating in your blood. So for dopamine to act in your brain as a neurotransmitter, it must be synthesized inside the brain.
So when I read that, say, a ripe banana has 40 to 50 parts per million of dopamine, that's useless for my brain.
Completely useless for your central nervous system, yes.
Yeah.
That dopamine gets processed in your periphery.
Yeah.
It might affect your gut or your heart, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But it is not getting into your brain to power motivation.
And that's why L-dopa is the go-to drug for Parkinson's.
Precisely, because L-dopa, the precursor, can slip past the BBB. Once it's inside, the remaining neurons can just grab it and convert it into the dopamine they need.
Okay, so once the dopamine is released and it's done its job, how does the system clean up? How does it break down?
The breakdown, it mainly involves 2 key sets of enzymes. You have monoamine oxidase, or MAO, and catecholmethyltransferase, COMT.
And they break it down into what?
The final major end product of all this is something called homovanillic acid, or HVA. It's inert, doesn't do anything biologically, and it just gets filtered out by the kidneys.
I've seen HVA measurements used in research, right? Trying to estimate brain dopamine activity, especially for things like schizophrenia, but there's a problem with that.
Yeah, it's a real challenge for researchers. The difficulty is, well, it's separating the HVA that comes from dopamine from the HVA that comes from norepinephrine.
Ah, because they're both catecholamines.
Exactly. Their breakdown products can overlap, so it's really tricky to look at plasma levels and say, aha, this is definitely from brain dopamine activity.
And here's something I found pretty ominous. The dopamine molecule itself, it's essential, but it's also a bit dangerous for the cell.
It's a true double-edged sword. Dopamine is very susceptible to something called autoxidation.
Meaning it just reacts with oxygen.
Readily. And this reaction creates these highly reactive byproducts, ketones and free radicals. And these things are toxic. They can poison cells, cause severe oxidative stress.
And this is linked to Parkinson's disease.
There's very compelling evidence that this autoxidation is a major factor in the loss of those dopamine-producing neurons in Parkinson's. The very molecule that drives our movement carries a chemical risk to the cells that make it.
Wow. So if dopamine is the messenger, let's talk about the listeners, the receptors. What happens when it reaches a target cell?
Okay, so dopamine exerts its influence by binding to and activating specific receptors on the cell surface. We've identified 5 main subtypes, D1 through D5.
And there's another one, right? TARO1.
TARO1, yes, we'll come back to that one. It's a bit different. But D1 to D5, they're all what we call metabotropic receptors.
Okay, so for those of us listening, what does metabotropic mean in practical terms?
Right, so some receptors are like instant door openers. The key hits the lock, a channel opens, you get a fast electrical effect.
Okay.
Metabotropic receptors are more like complex internal switches. When dopamine binds, it triggers a whole cascade of events inside the cell. It's slower, broader. It changes the cell's long-term chemistry.
And these 5 receptors, they're grouped into 2 families.
Exactly. You have the D1-like family, which is D1 and D5. They generally stimulate the production of an internal messenger called GandM.
And D1 is the most common.
By far.
Yeah.
Then you have the D2-like family, D2, D3, and D4. They generally do the opposite. They inhibit GandM production.
And this right here, this is the most important takeaway for anyone trying to get past that pleasure chemical myth.
Yes. The single most crucial concept is that dopamine is not simply an on switch or an off switch.
It's not just excitatory or inhibitory?
Not at all. Its effect, whether it ultimately excites or inhibits the target neuron, depends entirely on which type of receptor is on that neuron's surface.
So the meaning is in the receptor, not the molecule itself.
You got it. The D1-like family often leads to excitation, but not always. And the D2-like family, generally speaking, it tends to lead to inhibition of the target neuron. It's a traffic controller with very specific instructions for each intersection.
Let's follow that whole cycle then, inside the synapse. After it's made, how is it stored?
Okay, so once it's synthesized, it needs to be protected. It gets transported into these tiny cellular storage units called secretory vesicles.
By a specific protein?
Yes, a transporter called VMAT2. Think of it like a little armored truck. It keeps the dopamine safe from oxidation until an action, potential, and electrical signal arise.
And that's the trigger for release?
That's the trigger, a process called exocytosis.
You mentioned TAR1 earlier, the one that's different. How does that receptor fit in?
TAR1 is fascinating. It's not on the surface. It's inside the cell. It's like the cell's internal self-check mechanism.
A regulator.
A regulator. When it gets activated, it can essentially tell the cell, okay, we have enough dopamine here, and it can inhibit the cell from firing more. It's also really important for how drugs like amphetamines work.
Okay, so dopamine is released, it hits the receptors.
Yeah.
Then what? The system has to reset fast.
Super fast. The cleanup is critical for precise signaling. The dopamine molecules unbind and are very quickly reabsorbed back into the cell that released them.
And that's done by the dopamine transporter, the DA.
The DDAT, exactly. It's the recycling crew. It grabs the dopamine from the synapse, pulls it back inside, and once it's inside, it can either be repackaged for the next signal or broken down by those enzymes we mentioned.
Finally, we should probably distinguish the 2 main modes of signaling.
Right. Good point. We have phasic release and tonic release.
Phasic is the big spike.
Phasic is the big spike. It's the action potential-driven burst. A huge, rapid flood of dopamine that's precisely timed with an event, usually a reward or a cue for a reward. This is what drives that moment-to-moment learning.
And tonic release. If phasic is the spike, this is the background hum.
That's a perfect way to put it. Tonic release is the sustained, low-level leakage of dopamine that happens without any action potentials. It's the background level, the baseline.
And it sets the mood of the system.
It sets the readiness, the sensitivity.
Yeah.
So changes in that tonic level can completely change how the brain responds to a big phasic signal when it comes along.
So we've done the chemical traffic control. Let's scale up to the brain. And it's still incredible to me that there are only about 400,000 of these dopaminergic neurons in the entire human brain.
It's a tiny fraction.
A tiny fraction, yet they have these massive system-wide effects.
Their power comes from their projection. They start in these small, concentrated areas, and then they just fan out across huge regions of the brain. And we categorize them into 4 major pathways.
Let's start with the one most tied to movement, the one that's so relevant for Parkinson's.
That would be the nigrostriatal pathway. It originates in the substantia nigra and projects massively to the dorsal striatum.
And this is all about motor control.
Foundational for motor control, initiating movement, executing it, and even learning new motor skills. It's the pathway that controls the very mechanics of how we move through the world.
Okay, next up, the one everyone thinks of, the reward and motivation pathway.
Right, the mesocortical limbic projection. This one starts in the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, and it splits into 2 main branches.
The mesolimbic and mesocortical.
Exactly. One goes to the nucleus accumbens, the other to the prefrontal cortex. And this whole system it's the key for reward, reinforcement, and motivating us to act.
And interestingly, it's not just for good things.
No. We now know it also plays a big role in aversion and fear learning. It's about what's important, not just what's pleasant.
And before we get deeper into those, what are the other 2 pathways? They're more about internal regulation.
They are. The tuberoinfundibular pathway runs from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland. Its main job is neuroendocrine. It's the primary brake on prolactin secretion.
So regulating lactation and reproductive hormones?
And then there's the smaller zona incerta pathway, which is involved in controlling hormones for reproductive development after puberty.
Okay, let's go back to movement. The basal ganglia is seen as this decision-making system. How does dopamine help it decide which action to take?
The leading idea is that the basal ganglia is responsible for action selection. So at any given moment, your brain has multiple options. Stand up, pick up that glass, stay still. The basal ganglia helps initiate one of those actions while actively suppressing all the others.
And dopamine helps in 2 different ways here.
2 very powerful and distinct ways.
What's the first one?
The first is setting the action threshold, basically the inertia. Dopamine controls how much chemical push is needed to start any movement at all.
So low dopamine means it's really hard to get going.
Exactly. That's why Parkinson's patients who have lost those cells have torpor, stiffness. They have extreme difficulty initiating movement. The threshold is just too high.
And on the flip side, too much dopamine.
Say from a psychostimulant.
Well,
The threshold drops to near 0. You get high motor activity, impulsivity, or those repetitive stereotype movements. Dopamine is literally the force that overcomes inertia.
So it dictates how hard it is to act. What's the second part, the learning part?
The second role is as a teaching signal. So when you perform an action and it's immediately followed by a burst of phasic dopamine, that actually changes the circuit.
He rewires it slightly.
It makes that specific response easier to activate the next time you're in that situation. It's the biological basis of operant conditioning. Dopamine is the signal that says, that worked, do it again.
And that teaching signal, that brings us to what might be the centerpiece of modern dopamine research, the distinction between wanting and liking.
This is probably the most vital concept to grasp. The consensus now is that dopamine primarily signals motivational salience.
Which means
the desire, the wanting that drives you to approach, to seek. It's the engine that propels you toward a goal.
Okay, so if dopamine is the engine of wanting, what drives liking, the actual subjective pleasure?
That pure hedonic pleasure, the liking, seems to be handled by separate systems, particularly opioid and GABAergic systems in places like the ventral pallidum. Dopamine's main job is getting you to the reward. It's not necessarily about the experience of the reward itself.
And that separation explains so much, especially addiction, where the desire becomes completely uncoupled from any real enjoyment.
Absolutely. Think about a severe addiction. The person feels this relentless, crippling craving, that's intense wanting, but they often report that using the substance isn't even pleasurable anymore.
The liking is gone.
The liking is gone, but the dopamine-driven seeking behavior has been super sensitized. It's a runaway train.
There are some really powerful animal models that show this dissociation. Can you walk us through the classic one?
Right, the evidence is stark. So researchers can selectively shut down the VTA dopamine system in rats. When they do this, the animal loses all motivation to seek food. It won't move to get it. It will starve.
But does it still like food?
Yes. If the researcher places the food directly in the animal's mouth, the rat will happily eat it. It shows all the normal signs of enjoyment, the specific facial expressions that indicate pleasure. They still have the capacity for liking, but they have lost the chemical engine for wanting.
Wow. That is an incredible separation. The drive is gone, but the pleasure remains.
It forces us to really redefine what motivation is. It's not the promise of pleasure. It's the brain assigning value or salience to a cue.
And this isn't just for physical rewards like food. A 2019 study applied this to something really abstract: music.
Yeah, this study was fascinating because it took it into a uniquely human domain. Researchers gave people levodopa to enhance dopamine and risperidone to block it. And they found that messing with dopamine changed both the motivation to listen to music and the pleasure they got from it.
How did they measure pleasure from music?
Physiologically, things like skin conductance in the presence of chills, those goosebumps you get from a powerful piece of music.
Le frisson.
The frisson, exactly. And they measured motivation by how much money subjects would spend to listen to a song. When dopamine was boosted, people reported more chills, more intense pleasure, and they were willing to pay more. When it was blocked, both went down.
So even for an abstract reward like music, dopamine signaling is a sine qua non condition, an essential prerequisite for it to feel good.
Exactly. It's what tells the brain that this experience matters. It's what assigns the value that then feeds the drive to seek it out again.
Okay, so if dopamine is signaling value and desire, how does that become the critical learning signal?
This is where the reward prediction error, or RPE, idea comes in. It's this groundbreaking hypothesis from researchers like Montague and Dayan. The idea is that these dopamine neurons act as sophisticated error detectors.
They don't just respond to reward.
No. They compare what you expected to happen with what actually happened.
Okay, so let's walk through the three scenarios. Say, I'm expecting my paycheck on Friday.
Right. Scenario 1, expected reward. You know it's coming. Friday rolls around, the money hits your account, the dopamine neurons, nothing really happens. No big spike.
Why not?
Because the prediction matched reality perfectly. There's no error, no new information, so no learning update is needed.
Okay, scenario 2, better than expected reward. I opened my bank account and I got a huge unexpected bonus.
That's when you get a sudden, sharp, massive spike in phasic dopamine, a positive prediction error. The brain basically yells, whoa, this is way better than I thought, pay attention, and that DA burst reinforces whatever you did that led to that surprise.
Making you more likely to do it again. And the last one, the negative. Scenario 3, omission of reward. I check my account and the money's not there.
Then the dopamine release drops sharply, way below the normal baseline level, a negative prediction error. It's a biological signal of disappointment. The brain updates its model to devalue the cues that led to that failed expectation. It says, that didn't work, don't trust that path as much.
It sounds like an engineering algorithm.
It really is, and that's the beauty of it. This biological mechanism maps almost perfectly onto computational methods in machine learning. Dopamine neurons aren't signaling pleasure, they're signaling surprise about value. They are a learning algorithm.
Let's shift now to the clinical side, to what happens when this system goes wrong, starting with the disease most tied to this molecule: Parkinson's.
Parkinson's is the textbook example of a dopamine deficit. It's caused by the progressive loss of those dopamine-secreting neurons in the substantia nigra.
Part of the nigrostriatal pathway.
Right. And when you lose about 70 to 80% of those cells, the drop in dopamine leads directly to those classic motor symptoms: the stiffness, the tremor, the slowed movement.
And the main treatment has to work around that blood-brain barrier we talked about.
Absolutely. Since dopamine itself can't get in, the most effective treatment is still L-dopa, or levodopa, the precursor molecule. It crosses the BBB, and the remaining cells can convert it into the dopamine the system is missing.
But you can't just give L-dopa on its own, right?
No, because most of it would get converted into dopamine out in the body, in the periphery, causing all sorts of side effects. So it's always given with an enzyme inhibitor, usually carbidopa.
And carbidopa stops that peripheral conversion.
Exactly. It makes sure that the maximum dose of L-dopa actually reaches the brain where it's needed.
We've established that high dopamine drives intense wanting. What happens when you're on this treatment long-term, getting these artificial floods of dopamine?
That's a huge long-term complication called dopamine dysregulation syndrome, or DDS. It's a behavioral disorder that happens because the medication is providing these really high non-physiological levels of dopamine.
And patients become compulsive.
They can become incredibly compulsive, often in natural reward-seeking behaviors: pathological gambling, hypersexuality, excessive shopping. It's a stark demonstration of how artificially jacking up the wanting system can completely override normal judgment.
Now let's talk addiction. How do drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine hijack the system?
They hit it right at its core. They dramatically increase dopamine levels, mainly by blocking the dopamine transporter, the D8.
The recycling crew?
They block the recycling crew, so dopamine can't get cleared from the synapse. It just builds up and up and up.
Causing a massive, unnatural reward signal.
An intense, non-physiological positive prediction error that just powerfully reinforces the drug-seeking behavior. That's what drives the incredibly high addiction potential.
And their withdrawal is very different from, say, opiates.
They're very different. Stimulant withdrawal is mostly psychological, but profoundly debilitating. Intense craving, deep depression, irritability, restlessness. You don't get the same kind of physical agony as with opiate withdrawal, but that psychological wanting, that craving, it can persist for years because the circuits have literally been rewired.
Okay, what about other major conditions? Schizophrenia and the old dopamine hypothesis.
The classic dopamine hypothesis suggested that psychosis, especially the positive symptoms like hallucinations, was caused by hyperactivity of the dopamine system.
And the evidence was that the first antipsychotics all blocked dopamine.
They were all D2 receptor antagonists. They worked by blocking dopamine signaling, which seemed to confirm the hypothesis.
But it's more complicated than just too much dopamine.
We now know it is. While D2 receptors are still strongly implicated, we also think there's hypoactivity, too little dopamine, in the prefrontal cortex, which could be related to the negative and cognitive symptoms. So the system is definitely dysfunctional, but it's not so simple.
Contrast that with ADHD, which is linked to decreased dopamine activity.
Right. In ADHD, the prefrontal cortex, which handles executive function, often shows reduced dopamine and norepinephrine activity. So the strange thing is that the best treatments are actually psychostimulants, like methylphenidate.
The same class of drugs that can be addictive, so why don't they cause problems in people with ADHD?
Because for those individuals, that boost in dopamine is just bringing the system up to a normal, functional baseline. Instead of causing overexcitement, it actually enhances signaling, improves cognitive control, focuses attention. It's a case where more dopamine leads to more regulation.
And we should touch on aging. There's a natural decline in dopamine, isn't there?
Yes, and it's an important piece of the puzzle. As we all age, there's a measurable, steady decline in both dopamine synthesis and the number of dopamine receptors we have.
And this contributes to some of the general slowing we see in older age.
It does. Things like decreased arm swing when walking, a bit more rigidity. It's not a disease like Parkinson's, but it's part of the normal aging process and contributes to a decline in motor and cognitive flexibility.
And one last, very practical link, dopamine and nausea.
Yes. There's a part of your brainstem called the area postrema. It monitors your blood for toxins, and it's what controls nausea.
And it's loaded with D2 receptors.
It's loaded with them, which means D2 agonists, drugs that activate those receptors, like some Parkinson's drugs, they frequently cause nausea as a side effect. And D2 antagonists are great anti-nausea medications because they shut that area down.
So now let's step completely outside the brain. We know peripheral dopamine can't cross the BBB, so it has this whole other life in the rest of the body.
A completely independent, but just as vital, life. It acts as this powerful local communicator. In the cardiovascular system, for instance, it's a potent vasodilator. It opens up blood vessels.
Which is why it's used in critical care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's given by FEV to treat severe low blood pressure or certain types of shock. But it's very dose dependent. At high doses, it can actually do the opposite, constrict vessels, so it has to be managed carefully.
And its role in the kidneys is tied to one of the biggest health problems in the world, hypertension.
The kidney is incredibly sensitive to dopamine. It actually makes its own dopamine locally.
And what does it do there?
Its most crucial job is to increase blood flow to the kidney and, most importantly, stimulate sodium excretion. It helps you get rid of salt.
So if that local kidney dopamine system is broken...
It's strongly implicated in high blood pressure. If your kidneys can't make or respond to dopamine properly, you can't get rid of sodium efficiently. You hold on to salt, you hold on to water, blood volume goes up, and that drives hypertension.
What about digestion?
It has a couple of regulatory roles there. In the pancreas, it can reduce insulin production. And in the gut itself, it slows down motility, which is thought to be a protective mechanism for the intestinal lining.
Looking back, dopamine is just an ancient molecule.
Staggeringly ancient. We found it in pretty much all multicellular animals, going back over 500 million years to things like jellyfish. This function is older than complex brains.
And the basic role motor control, reward learning, it's consistent across all these species.
The consistency is just remarkable. Whether you're looking at a nematode worm or a human, dopamine is doing a very similar job. The biological algorithm for learning from your mistakes is just deeply, deeply conserved.
And we have to circle back to plants. We know we can't get dopamine into our brains from them, but it's interesting that it's there.
It is, in bananas, potatoes, avocados. But more importantly, the precursor, L-DOAP, is also in plants, most famously in the velvet bean, mucuna pruriens, and fava beans.
And those were used as medicine.
They were used for centuries as a natural source of the one thing that can cross the BBB, long before we could synthesize the drug.
And one last really elegant role. Dopamine is actually a pigment.
It is. It's a precursor for a type of melanin called dopamine melanin. This is the dark pigment that gives the substantia nigra, which literally means black substance, its color.
Wow.
And get this, that same chemical is responsible for creating some of the dark, complex patterns on the wings of butterflies. A direct chemical link between human motivation and the beauty of the natural world.
So as we wrap this up, it's clear dopamine is not the simple joy button we thought it was.
Not at all. It's this incredibly versatile ancient molecule, a critical neuromodulator in the brain, a vital local hormone in the body.
I think the biggest takeaway is that its fundamental job isn't to deliver pleasure, but to regulate action. It is the engine of wanting and the calculator of prediction.
And that leads to a final profound thought for you to consider. We've established that desire, this intense wanting, is chemically separable from pure pleasure, from liking. So given that addictive drugs can hijack this system to create a pursuit that's completely divorced from enjoyment, how does that chemical reality change how you think about your own willpower, your own desires, and the goals you chase every day?
A heavy question.
It is. If the systems for wanting and liking can operate independently, how often are we compulsively seeking things we don't actually value or even enjoy once we get them? That's a question that challenges the very nature of motivation itself.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of sources today that tell a story so strange, if you pitched it as a movie script, the studio would probably send it back with a note saying, "This is too confusing, nobody has two numbers."
It is a bit of a logic puzzle, isn't it?
It really is. We are looking at a monarch today, a central figure in European history who goes by the name Francis. But depending on which history book you open, or, which paragraph of the same book you're reading, he is listed as Francis II or Francis II.
And that's the key.
And I want to be crystal clear for everyone listening right at the top. We aren't talking about a father and a son here.
No.
We aren't talking about cousins. We are talking about the same man in the same lifetime.
That's right. In German historiography, he's often called the Doppelkaiser.
The double emperor.
The double emperor, which I know sounds like a very ominous comic book villain or maybe a very expensive sandwich, but it actually describes a unique legal survival strategy that we haven't really seen before or since.
And that nickname, the Doppelkaiser, is really the hook for me. Because this isn't just a story about a guy who decided to rebrand because he didn't like the number 2.
Not at all.
This deep dive is about survival on a continental scale. We are looking at a man who sat on a throne that had existed for 1,000 years, the Holy Roman Empire, and watched it literally disintegrate beneath him.
And yet, and this is a crucial part, he didn't disappear with it. Most monarchs who lose their empires, they end up in exile, or in a prison cell, or
on the scaffold.
Francis managed to swap horses in midstream while the river was on fire.
Let's set the scene because the context here is just wild. I mean, the map of Europe is exploding. The French Revolution is tearing up the rulebook of how the world works. Napoleon is rising, marching across the continent like a force of nature.
It's total chaos.
And sitting in Vienna on this ancient, creaky throne is Francis. And as we went through the source material, the stack of letters, patents, and biographies, what struck me is that he seems like the ultimate underdog. But not the scrappy hero underdog. Well, how would you describe him?
He's the bureaucratic underdog.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of a man who isn't the brilliant conqueror. He isn't the charismatic leader who gives the big inspirational speech.
Right.
But he is a brilliant survivor. He is, the cockroach in the nuclear wasteland of the Napoleonic Wars. He just keeps going.
That is a vivid image. So that's our mission today. We want to understand how a man who is described by his own family, his own uncle, actually, as a spoiled mother's child, managed to outlast Napoleon Bonaparte. How do you preside over the death of the Holy Roman Empire and the birth of the Austrian Empire without losing your head?
Well, I think we have to start with that description you just mentioned, spoiled mother's child. That wasn't just a random insult thrown out at a family dinner. That was a
It's a
diagnosis,
clinical assessment.
a clinical assessment from the man who shaped Francis's entire worldview.
Let's rewind the clock then. To understand the emperor, we have to understand the boy. And honestly, the source material on his childhood is a little heartbreaking. It starts out well enough, right? He's born in 1768 in Florence.
Florence is crucial here. At the time, his father, Leopold, is the Grand Duke of Tuscany. And the Tuscan court was, well, it was different. It was the Enlightenment in practice. It was relatively loose, indulgent, and warm.
So not the stiff, formal Vienna court we might picture.
Not at all. Francis grows up surrounded by siblings in a happy, sunny Italian atmosphere. You know, they're running around the Palazzo Pitti, eating good food, enjoying the Italian sun.
It sounds idyllic. It sounds like the kind of childhood anyone would want. But in the Habsburg family, happiness usually means you aren't important enough yet.
That's a great way to put it.
Then destiny comes knocking in the form of his uncle, the Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II.
Joseph II is a massive figure in history, one of the enlightened despots. He wanted to modernize everything, rationalize everything. He was a workaholic who slept on a straw mat. But personally, he was intense.
Intense is one word for it.
And he had a problem. He had no surviving children. His wives had died, his children had died.
So he looks at his brother Leopold's family in Florence, this big, happy, chaotic Italian family, and points at young Francis.
Exactly. He knew Francis was the future. The weight of the entire Habsburg legacy, a legacy that spanned Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, the Americas, the Holy Roman Empire, was going to fall on this kid. So in 1784, when Francis is just a teenager, Joseph orders him to Vienna.
This is the imperial boot camp phase.
It was an abduction in all but name. Joseph II took personal charge of Francis's development, and Joseph looked at this soft Italian-raised boy and was, I think, just horrified. He saw a kid who's used to comfort, used to smiling, used to being loved.
And Joseph decided he needed to break him.
Break him down to build him up in his mind.
I found some direct quotes from Joseph II in the notes, and they are brutal. I mean, just imagine your uncle writing this about you in official state papers that historians are going to read 200 years later. He called Francis stunted in growth, backward in bodily dexterity, and, here's that kicker again, neither more nor less than a spoiled mother's child.
It's incredibly harsh. But you have to understand Joseph's perspective. He wasn't trying to be cruel for fun. He was terrified for the state. He analyzed the boy and concluded, and I'm paraphrasing the source here, that the way Francis had been treated for 16 years had confirmed him in the delusion that the preservation of his own person was the only thing of importance.
The preservation of his own person. Keep that phrase in mind. Because Joseph meant it as a scathing criticism. He meant Francis was selfish and soft.
Yeah.
But looking at the rest of Francis's life, that becomes his superpower, doesn't it?
It becomes his prime directive. It becomes the lens through which he sees every single decision. But Joseph's method for fixing this defect was what he called fear and unpleasantness.
Fear and unpleasantness. That sounds like the title of a really bad parenting book.
He literally wrote that down as a pedagogical strategy.
Yeah.
He deliberately isolated the young Archduke. He cut him off from his friends, from any comfort.
Why? What was the logic there?
He believed Francis failed to lead himself or do his own thinking because he was always coddled. So Joseph forced independence through isolation. He made Francis feel utterly alone in the world.
That sounds deeply traumatic. You take a teenager, you rip him away from his family, tell him he's worthless and stunted, and then you isolate him in a cold palace in Vienna with a guy who sleeps on straw.
It was traumatic. But we have to ask, did it work? It definitely shaped Francis's ruling style. It created a man who was disciplined. Yes, he learned to work hard. But it also created a man who was deeply, deeply suspicious. A man who learned that the world is a dangerous place, that people are essentially threats, and that you have to protect yourself above all else because no one else is going to do it for you.
And he didn't just stay in the classroom, right? The sources mention he was sent to join the army.
Yes, to a regiment in Hungary. And surprisingly, Francis actually settled into military life quite well. He was present at the siege of Belgrade during the Austro-Turkish War. So he wasn't a coward physically.
He could do the job.
He learned the routine of command. He learned how to sit on a horse and look like an emperor. But the psychological imprint of the uncle, that never went away.
It's that classic complex relationship. He feared Joseph, but the sources say he admired him too. He wanted to be him, but he was terrified of him.
And he didn't have to wait long to take the reins. Joseph II works himself to death, quite literally, and dies in 1790. Francis's father, Leopold, becomes emperor. Leopold tries to fix the mess Joseph left, but the strain is too much. He dies just 2 years later, in March 1792.
So at 24 years old, just 24, Francis is now the Holy Roman Emperor. He is the secular head of Christendom. And talk about bad timing. What does the inbox look like in 1792?
The inbox is on fire. The French Revolution is in full swing. The Bastille has fallen. The monarchies of Europe are terrified.
Absolutely terrified.
The very idea of monarchy is under attack. And Francis, who we know has been trained to be suspicious and fearful of chaos, is now staring down the barrel of revolutionary France.
And this isn't just geopolitical abstract theory for him, it's personal.
Very personal. His aunt is Marie Antoinette.
The Queen of France.
Right. She's his father's sister. And in 1793, just a year into Francis's reign, she is guillotined by the revolutionaries.
And you have to put yourself in his shoes. You're 25. You've been trained by a scary uncle to be paranoid. And now the neighbors have just chopped off your aunt's head. That has to set the tone for his entire foreign policy.
It certainly solidified his hatred of radicalism. Though interestingly, the sources hint at that emotional detachment Joseph drilled into him. He was shocked, politically enraged, but he didn't mourn her like a nephew mourning an aunt.
He mourned her like a...
He mourned her like a king mourning a violated treaty. It was a declaration of war against his caste.
So he goes to war. The French Revolutionary Wars begin.
And they go poorly. Francis leads the empire into war against France. And let's be honest, the Austrians are old-fashioned, slow, and bureaucratic. The French are energized, chaotic, and massive.
They're a whole different kind of army.
A different world. Francis loses the left bank of the Rhine. He loses influence in Italy. He's getting beaten up on the battlefield.
But the military losses are almost secondary to the existential crisis that starts brewing around 1804. This is where the Doppelkaiser plot really kicks in. This is the moment where Francis has to get creative.
1804 is the turning point.
Yeah.
That's when Napoleon decides that being first consul isn't cool enough anymore.
No.
He wants an upgrade. He wants the big chair.
He wants the big chair.
Exactly. Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French. Now, to a modern listener, that just sounds like another title. King, Emperor, what's the difference? But we have to understand what Emperor meant in 1804. For 1,000 years, in Western Europe, there was only one emperor.
The Holy Roman Emperor. It was a singular title. It was like being the Pope. There's only one.
Uniqueness was the whole point. It linked back to Rome, to Charlemagne. It carried supreme prestige. Kings were powerful, but the emperor was the emperor. He was the first among monarchs. He had precedence.
So if Napoleon calls himself emperor, he's challenging the entire hierarchy of the universe as Francis understands it.
He is crashing the exclusive club. And Francis realizes that the Holy Roman Empire structure is crumbling. It's weak. It's bankrupt of authority. The German princes are starting to look at Napoleon with interest.
They're sniffing the wind?
They are. So Francis does the math.
Yeah.
If the Holy Roman Empire dissolves and he is left as just the Archduke of Austria, he will be outranked by Napoleon.
He can't have that. It's about status, but in diplomacy, status is power. If you walk into a room and you have to bow to the other guy, you've already lost the negotiation.
Precisely. If he is just a king or an archduke, he has to walk behind Napoleon at the peace conference. So Francis pulls a legal maneuver that is, frankly, brilliant and bizarre. On August 11, 1804, he issues a patent declaring himself the hereditary Emperor of Austria.
Wait, so he just invented a promotion for himself?
Essentially.
Yeah.
He took his dynastic lands, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, Croatia, and just wrapped them up in a new imperial title. He created a new container for his power.
So for 2 years, from 1804 to 1806, he is Francis II, Holy Roman Emperor.
And Francis I, Emperor of Austria.
At the same time, he's the emperor of 2 different empires.
Yes, he is the Doppelkaiser.
I love the analogy we use in the prep notes. It's like a CEO realizing his old legacy company, the Holy Roman Empire, is about to go bankrupt. It's full of debt, bad contracts, the board of directors hates him. So he quietly incorporates a new shell company, Austria Inc., transfers all his best assets, the real estate, the cash, the factories, to the new company, and appoints himself CEO of that one, too.
That is almost exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It was corporate restructuring on a dynastic level. And the funny thing is, technically, under imperial law, this was completely illegal.
Illegal.
You couldn't just invent a new imperial title within the Holy Roman Empire. It defied the Constitution.
So why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't the lawyers jump in?
Because Napoleon agreed to it, Napoleon recognized the title, and because Napoleon had the biggest army in Europe, if he said it was okay, it was okay.
Makes right.
Napoleon didn't care about the legality. He liked the idea of another emperor because it validated his own new title. See, emperors are a thing now. It's the new trend.
But the old company, the Holy Roman Empire, didn't last much longer, did it? The bankruptcy was coming.
No. The end came in 1806. Napoleon established the Confederation of the Rhine.
Which was what, exactly?
Basically, Napoleon organized a bunch of German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, that used to be under Francis's jurisdiction. He bundled them together and made himself their protector.
He stole Francis's direct reports.
He stole the buffer zone, he stole the army recruitment grounds, and then he issued an ultimatum, July 22, 1806. Napoleon gives Francis until August 10th to abdicate as Holy Roman Emperor.
Or else what?
Or else French troops march into Vienna again. Or else the destruction of the Habsburg monarchy. A war Francis knew he couldn't win. So on August 6, 1806, Francis bows to the inevitable.
He gives in.
He releases the German states from their allegiance. He declares the Holy Roman Empire dissolved.
That is a massive moment in history. We breeze past it in textbooks, but this institution started with Charlemagne, or Otto the Great, depending on how you count. It defined medieval Europe. It was the structure of the world, and Francis is the guy who turns off the lights.
He is the liquidator.
Yeah.
And that has to be a humiliation. To be the monarch who loses the title that his ancestors held for centuries, it's a stain on his honor. He's the guy who let the torch go out. But, and this is the key to Francis, because he had created the Emperor of Austria title 2 years earlier, he didn't fall into obscurity.
He had a parachute.
He had a golden parachute. He remained an emperor. He preserved his rank. If he hadn't done that, he would have just been another defeated German prince. But because he was Francis III of Austria, he was still a great power.
The preservation of his own person. Uncle Joseph would be proud. Or maybe horrified.
Or both. In a dark way, yes. He saved the furniture while the house burned down.
But the fire wasn't out. The wars with Napoleon kept going. And reading the summary of the next few years, it's just grim for Austria. Austerlitz, Wagram, these are crushing defeats.
They are disasters. The Treaty of Pressburg, the Treaty of Schönbrunn. Austria is losing territory left and right. They lose Venice, they lose Dalmatia, they lose Tyrol. At one point, Austria becomes entirely landlocked.
Wow.
Its preeminence in Germany is shattered. The treasury is empty. They are printing paper money that is becoming worthless.
It seems hopeless. The Austrian Empire, this new thing he built, is teetering on the edge. But then in 1809, after another defeat, Francis does something that I think defines his survival at all costs mentality. He makes an alliance with the man who has been tormenting him.
He doesn't just make an alliance, he seals it with a marriage.
This is the part that blows my mind. He marries off his daughter, Marie-Louise, to Napoleon.
Think about the psychological toll of that. Napoleon is the man who forced Francis to dissolve the Holy Roman Empire. He is the Antichrist of the Revolution. He is the enemy of everything the Habsburgs stand for. He's a usurper.
Not an upstart.
And now Francis has to give him his own daughter.
And Napoleon had just divorced his first wife, Josephine, because she couldn't give him an heir. So Marie-Louise isn't just going there to be a trophy wife.
No.
She is being sent into the lion's den as a broodmare for the enemy. She is there to breed the next generation of Bonaparte.
Precisely. She was terrified. She grew up calling Napoleon the ogre. She had dolls named Napoleon that she would stick pins in.
Right.
And Francis, he signed the contract.
How does a father do that? I mean, I know they are royals and it's a different world, but still.
It's ultimate pragmatism, is putting the state and his own throne above everything.
Yeah.
Above pride, above family feelings. There's a scene in the sources where Metternich, the foreign minister who is rising to power right now, brings the proposal to Francis. And Francis just asks, what does my daughter say?
Oh, so he puts it on her.
He pushes the decision onto her, but he knows she has no choice. He sacrifices her to save the dynasty.
And it worked.
It bought Austria time, it stopped the wars, it gave them a few years to rebuild the army and the economy, while Napoleon went off to fight other people.
But Francis was never truly loyal to Napoleon, was he? Even as a father-in-law, even when his grandson was born.
Never. He was biding his time, he was waiting for the wind to change, he sent his daughter to Paris, but he kept his powder dry in Vienna.
And in 1812, the wind changed.
Russia.
Right.
Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia. He marches in with the Grand Armée, hundreds of thousands of men, and comes back with a handful of frozen survivors. He is weak. And this is Francis's moment.
Does he hesitate? I mean, his daughter is the Empress of France. His grandson is the King of Rome. If he attacks Napoleon, he's attacking his own family.
He doesn't hesitate for a second. The preservation of his own person and his empire comes first. In 1813, Austria switches sides. Again.
Switcheroo.
Francis joins the Sixth Coalition. Russia, Prussia, Britain, Sweden. And this time, they win. They defeat Napoleon at Leipzig in the Battle of Nations, and then they march on Paris.
And suddenly, the guy who was losing for 20 years is the host of the victory party, the Congress of Vienna.
It was a triumph for Francis. He hosts all the monarchs of Europe in Vienna. It's months of balls, banquets, and backroom deals. The city is glittering. Beethoven is conducting concerts. And this is where we have to mention his right-hand man, Clemens von Metternich.
The famous chancellor. We can't tell this story without him.
Francis and Metternich were a formidable team. Metternich was the face-charming, brilliant, diplomatic, the guy who could talk circles around anyone. Francis was the anchor, stubborn, cautious, the final authority.
A decision maker?
At the Congress, they reshaped the map of Europe. They restored Austria as a major power. They got back most of the territory they had lost, including in Italy.
And they set up a system, the Holy Alliance, to crush any future revolutions.
The system, that's what they called it. The idea was that the great powers would work together to stomp out liberalism wherever it appeared. If students rioted in Italy, Austrian troops would march in. If Poland rose up, Russia would crush it. It was a police state on a continental level.
So Francis goes from the stunted child to the liquidator of the empire to the savior of the old order.
It's quite the arc. And it brings us to his domestic policy. Because while he was reshaping Europe, he was also reshaping how Austria was run. And this is where the good father image clashes with the reality of a police state.
Yeah, let's talk about that image. If you look at the paintings from this time, specifically the ones by Peter Fendi, Francis looks like the sweetest guy.
He really does.
He's surrounded by grandkids, he's smiling, he's wearing comfortable clothes. The source material says he was very approachable, right?
Yes, famously so. He held audiences twice a week. Anyone, peasant, merchant, noble, could make an appointment to see the emperor. And he would speak to them in their own language. German, Italian, maybe a bit of Czech or Hungarian.
That's incredible.
That was very important to him. He wanted to be seen as the father of his people. He walked around Vienna without guards. He bought toys for children in the shops.
The Biedermeier emperor, cozy, safe, like a grandfather clock.
There's a but, a very big but. While he was playing the benevolent father, he was terrified of dissent. Remember the Jacobin conspiracy in 1794?
Right, that was early in his reign.
A group of officers in the Austrian and Hungarian armies were caught reading French revolutionary pamphlets. Some were plotting. Francis cracked down hard. Officers were hanged. Many died in prison. That event scarred him.
So he was convinced it could happen again at any moment.
He was convinced that revolution was hiding under every bed, in every book, in every song.
So he built a spy network.
And a massive one. He expanded the police state to levels that were previously unknown in Central Europe. He created a bureaucracy of surveillance. The sources mention that he even had spies watching his own brothers, Archduke Charles and Archduke Johann.
He spied on his own brothers.
Trust no one. The preservation of his own person. He didn't want any rival power centers, even within his family. Archduke Charles was a war hero. He was the one general who actually beat Napoleon once.
Right, at Aspern-Essling.
Exactly. And Francis was jealous and suspicious of his popularity. So the police watched him. They opened his mail.
And censorship. The sources describe it as suffocating.
It was. Books, plays, newspapers, everything was checked. You couldn't import books from abroad without a permit. There's a great anecdote in the source material about the playwright Franz Grillparzer.
Oh, Grillparzer, yes. He's like the Austrian Shakespeare of that era.
A brilliant writer and a Habsburg patriot. He wasn't a revolutionary. He was a loyal subject. But the censors banned one of his plays as a precautionary measure.
Precautionary, that's amazing, banning it just in case.
Exactly. When Grillparzer finally met the censor and asked, "What is wrong with the play? What did I say? Is there a line I should change?" The censor replied, and this is a direct quote, "Oh, nothing at all." But I thought to myself, one can never tell.
One can never tell. That is chilling. It's the logic of a totalitarian bureaucracy. Better to silence something innocent than risk letting something dangerous slip through.
That sums up the later years of Francis's reign perfectly. It was an era of stability, yes. The wars were over, people could make money, they could listen to music, but it was a stifling stability.
He was trying to freeze time.
To prevent any new ideas, any liberalism, any nationalism from taking root, he famously told a group of professors, "I do not need savants, I need good citizens."
He wanted subjects, not thinkers.
He even cut the military budget drastically in his later years to save money and prevent the army from becoming too powerful, which would cause huge problems for his successors in 1848 and 1866. But for his lifetime, It kept things quiet.
It's ironic because one of the things he commissioned to boost patriotism during the wars is still with us today, the anthem.
Yes. This connects back to the struggle with Napoleon. During the wars with France, he saw how the French had La Marseillaise, this rousing revolutionary song that got everyone pumped up, and the British had God Save the King.
Yeah.
He realized Austria needed a patriotic song to rally the people around him.
So he hired the best.
So he commissioned the great composer, Joseph Haydn.
Talk about hiring top talent. That's like hiring Beyoncé to write your campaign jingle.
And Haydn wrote, Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser.
God Save Emperor Francis.
It premiered in 1797 on the emperor's birthday. And the melody. Well, if you listen to the German national anthem today, the Deutschlandlied, it is that same melody.
So every time the German football team plays, they are technically humming a tune written for Francis.
In a way, yes. It's a musical legacy that outlasted his empire. And it reflects his desire for unity and loyalty.
Francis died in 1835 at the age of 67. The source says he died of a sudden fever.
And true to form, his final thoughts were about the family and the preservation of the system. His political testament to his son and heir, Ferdinand, was, preserve unity in the family and regard it as one of the highest goods.
Which is rich, coming from the guy who spied on his brothers.
Well, perhaps he spied on them to ensure unity. Enforced unity is still unity in his mind.
That is a very Francis way of looking at it.
Indeed. And he also told Ferdinand, govern and change nothing.
Change nothing.
Which Ferdinand, who was intellectually disabled and very reliant on Metternich, followed religiously. But the pressure cooker eventually exploded in 1848, a decade later. Francis put a lid on the pot, but he didn't turn off the heat.
He bought stability for his lifetime, but at the cost of the future.
That's it, exactly.
So let's zoom out. We have gone through the abuse, the wars, the title changes, the police state. When we look at Francis II tonight, what is the verdict?
He is a man of contradictions. He was a stunted child who grew up to outlast the greatest conqueror of his age. He was a loving patriarch who ran a police state. He was the man who lost the Holy Roman Empire, which is a huge failure on paper, but he successfully pivoted to build the Austrian Empire, which lasted until 1918.
It brings up a really interesting, provocative thought. History loves the Napoleons. We love the bold innovators, the generals who smash the board and rewrite the rules. They are exciting. We write movies about them. We quote them.
But they also tend to burn out. Napoleon died in exile on a rock in the Atlantic, alone and defeated. Francis died in his own bed, in his own capital, leaving his throne to his son with his empire intact.
So the question for you, the listener, is this. In times of chaos, in times of massive disruption, what is the better form of success? Is it better to be the brilliant flame that burns bright and crashes? Or is it better to be the Francis, the pragmatic, cautious, maybe slightly paranoid bureaucrat who bends and shifts and compromises, but survives to write the rules?
It's the tortoise and the hare, on an imperial scale.
Yeah.
And in this case, the tortoise kept the crown.
That's all for today's deep dive into the Doppelkaiser. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Friday, February 13th, 2026.
It is.
And I have to say, looking at the calendar on the wall and the absolute mountain of research you've brought to the table today,
Ah, yes.
the timing is actually kind of spooky, but, in a good way.
It is serendipitous, isn't it? Friday the 13th usually conjures up, well, slasher movies and bad luck in the Western canon.
Right.
But we are sitting here, effectively, on the precipice of a completely different cultural shift.
A huge one.
One that is arguably much more significant than a superstition about a date on the Gregorian calendar.
We are quite literally standing on the threshold.
Literally.
According to the source material, specifically the astronomical data table, we are exactly 4 days away from a massive reset. The Year of the Fire Horse officially kicks off on February 17th, 2026.
Next Tuesday.
That is next Tuesday.
Which means we have this very narrow window this weekend, really, to get everyone prepared. And the mission of this deep dive isn't just to, read a horoscope or tell you what color underwear to wear for luck.
No.
We want to move beyond the placemat at the Chinese restaurant and understand the engine under the hood of this date.
Ah.
We are looking at the horse, or in Chinese, Yin, and specifically the elemental force of the fire horse.
Right. We want to understand the history, the elementary cycles, and all the specific associations, because when you look at the stats for this year, it feels like we are strapping ourselves into a rocket ship.
It really does. If you look at the energy profile, this is not a year for hibernation.
Not at all. So let's start with the what. The identity of this entity we are about to encounter next Tuesday.
Okay.
The Chinese character identified in the source is Ik-A.
Am. That is the pictograph for the animal itself.
The actual horse.
But in the astrological system, the Bazi, or four pillars of destiny, the earthly branch symbol associated with the horse is Wu.
Woo!
And this distinction is important because Wu isn't just a horse. It's a coordinate in time.
I see. And the source breaks down the specific stats for this coordinate. It's almost like a character sheet in a role-playing game.
That's a great way to put it.
And looking at them, it's a pretty intense character build.
It is high intensity across the board.
Yeah.
Let's look at the foundational astrological elements derived from the source. First, you have the fixed element.
Fire.
Right. Every animal in the zodiac has a native element. The rat is water, the tiger is wood,
And the horse is fire.
the horse is fire. Then you have the force yin or yang,
It is definitively yang.
very yang. And finally, the season,
Summer.
summer. Specifically, the source notes the lunar month, corresponding roughly to June 7th through July 6th.
Okay, so let's just pause and really look at that combination.
We have to.
You have fire, which is the element of heat, transformation, and ascending energy.
Right.
You have yang, which is active, masculine, bright, and outward projecting.
Yep.
And you have the peak of summer, the summer solstice window.
It is a trifecta of peakness, if that's even a word.
Huh? I like it.
You don't look at fire, yang, summer and think about introspection or quiet reading or staying indoors.
No, you think about movement.
You think about movement. You think about the sun at high noon.
That's a great analogy. If the rat, which is water and winter, is midnight.
Then the horse is 12:00 p.m.
Exactly.
Precisely. It is the moment of maximum visibility. Shadows are shortest. Everything is eliminated.
So if we are entering a horse year, the implication is that things are going to be seen.
That's right.
Secrets are hard to keep at high noon. Action is favored over planning.
It sounds like we better drink some espresso before Tuesday just to keep up.
I think so. But before we get too far into the future and what the specific fire horse means, I want to take a step back.
Good idea.
One of the things that just blew my mind in this reading was just how old this system is.
It is incredibly deep. I mean, we're dealing with a timeline that makes the Gregorian calendar look like a tech startup.
We're talking 14th century BC for the roots of the lunar calendar.
That's where the archaeological evidence, the oracle bones from the Shang dynasty, starts to give us hard data on the sequence.
Wow.
But the mythology, the story, the culture tells itself about where this came from, that goes back even further. The source mentions Emperor Huangdi.
The Yellow Emperor, the legendary first emperor of China.
Right. The legend says that in 2637 BC, Huangdi invented the Chinese lunar calendar to follow the cycles of the moon.
2600 BC.
That is over 4,500 years ago.
That is just staggering. We are participating in a timekeeping ritual that has survived the rise and fall of countless empires.
And it survives because it's not just math, it's folklore. You can't talk about the origins without talking about the race.
The Great Race. I feel like this is the one part of the story most people know, but the details are actually really important for understanding the horse's personality.
They are. They really are. So the Jade Emperor hosts a race across a river to decide the order of the zodiac.
Right.
The rat wins by cunning hitching a ride on the ox.
Classic rat move.
The tiger and rabbit follow. The dragon, who could have flown across instantly, stops to make rain for a drought-stricken village. So he comes in fifth.
Which is very noble, but then comes the horse.
Then comes the horse. It was galloping toward the finish line, looking like a solid contender for sixth place. It has the speed, it has the stamina.
All set.
But hidden, wrapped around the horse's hoof,
Was the snake?
the snake had hitched a ride, just like the rat did with the ox.
So clever.
And right at the finish line, the snake uncoiled and snapped.
And the horse panicked.
It reared back. The source notes the folklore specifically mentions the horse was startled.
Ah, okay.
In that split second of hesitation and shock, the snake slithered across the line to take sixth place. The horse recovered and took seventh.
Seventh place. Firmly in the middle of the pack.
Yes.
But that story tells us something really important about the sign, doesn't it? It's high energy, it's fast, but it can be skittish.
It suggests a vulnerability to surprise. The horse is yang. It's looking forward, projecting outward. It isn't necessarily looking down at its own hooves.
I see.
So while it has immense power, it can be thrown off course by the unexpected detail.
That's a really nuanced way to look at it. It's not just, I'm a horse, I like to run.
Yeah,
It's, I'm a horse, I have high potential, but I need to watch out for the snakes in the grass.
Exactly. And moving from the myth back to the history, the custom of pairing these animals with specific years dates back to the Han Dynasty.
Which is roughly 201 BC to 220 AD.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time the Roman Empire is dealing with Hannibal and the Caesars, this system is really locking into place in China.
And it influences everything, including art. The source describes a specific visualization from the Tang Dynasty, that's the 8th century, found in the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Yes. This description caught my imagination. These are not just statues of animals.
No. They are figures depicted with human bodies, but animal heads.
So strange.
And they are often dressed in the robes of court officials.
Which is such a cool, almost surreal way to visualize time. It anthropomorphizes the year.
It does.
It suggests that the year of the horse isn't just about a farm animal, it's about a human experience that is wearing the mask or the persona of the horse.
It implies that time has a character. When we cross that threshold on Tuesday, the minister of time changes.
Yep.
The rabbit takes off the robe.
And the horse puts it on.
And the horse governs differently. The horse has different priorities.
That is a great mental image. We are all putting on the horse masks starting Tuesday.
We are.
But here's where I used to get confused, and I think a lot of listeners do too.
Okay.
I'm looking at the chart, and I see Fire Horse for 2026. But wasn't there a horse year just a while ago? 2014? How does that work?
This is the matrix. It's the interaction between the 12 earthly branches, the animals, and the 10 heavenly stems, the elements.
The stems.
This is where it stops being a simple 12-year repeat and becomes a 60-year supercycle.
Okay, let's break this down because the source lists a whole table of dates, and they are all horses, but there are all different flavors of horse.
Right. So you have the 12 animals,
Yeah.
but interacting with those animals, you have the 5 elements: fire, earth, metal, water, and wood.
Right.
And each element has a yin and a yang state.
So it takes 60 years to get back to the exact same combination.
Exactly. We are entering the year of the fire horse, specifically Bing Wuan, February 17th, 2026.
And the last time we saw a fire horse
Was January 21st, 1966.
1966. That's a huge gap.
It's a lifetime. And 1966 was a year of massive global intensity. The Cultural Revolution began in China. The Vietnam War was escalating.
Wow.
It was a year of heat in every sense of the word.
And if you look at the pattern in the source, you can see how the vibe shifts. In 2002, we had the water horse.
Now think about that combination. Horse is fire. The year was water.
So water on fire.
Water extinguishes fire. So
Oh.
2002, the post-9/11 world, was a year of conflict, of dampening, of steam.
Then in 2014, it was the wood horse.
Wood feeds fire.
Okay.
So 2014 was a year where the horse's nature was supported. It was a year of growth, of combustible energy.
And looking ahead, the next time we see the horse after this year will be 2038.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be an earth horse.
Earth is formed by fire ash. So the earth horse is usually seen as more grounded, perhaps a bit slower, more stable.
But 2026.
2026 is fire on fire.
The horse is fire. The year is fire.
It is pure, concentrated, double-dose energy. There is no water to cool it down. There is no earth to ground it. It is just an accelerator pedal pressed all the way to the floor.
That explains the intensity we were talking about earlier.
It does.
And the source mentions something else interesting. It says, horse aspects can also enter by other chronomantic factors or measures, such as hourly.
That's a key detail for the deep dive. Western astrology often focuses heavily on the month, your sun sign.
Right.
Chinese astrology is fractal. You have the year animal, but you also have a month animal, a day animal, and an hour animal.
And the hour of the horse.
It is 11:00:00 a.m. to 1:20 p.m. midday.
High noon again.
Again, when the sun is highest. High yang. So even if you weren't born in a horse year, you might have a horse hour in your chart or a horse day.
It's all so consistent. It's all pointing to that peak brightness.
It is.
Now, speaking of alignment, let's talk about luck. The source material provides what I'm calling the cheat sheet for the horse.
That's the practical application. If you buy into the energy, how do you surf it?
Right. So if you are looking to align with this energy, or if you were born in a horse year, there are some very specific rules here. Let's start with the numbers.
Okay, so the lucky numbers are 1, 4, 5, 7, and 9.
A pretty broad spread. 7 makes sense, given the race. 9 is often associated with longevity and the emperor.
True.
but the avoid list is crucial.
Yes. Avoid 2, 3, and 6.
So if you're betting on roulette this year, maybe steer clear of that cluster. What about flowers? The source lists 2 specific ones.
Sunflower and jasmine.
The sunflower makes perfect sense to me. It is the most yang summer fire flower imaginable.
It absolutely is.
It literally looks like the sun and tracks the sun across the sky.
It does. It's heliotropic. It embodies the year's energy. Jasmine is interesting, too. It blooms in the heat. It has that intense fragrance that hangs in the heavy summer air.
It does. Now, the colors, this is where I found a really interesting visual clash.
Yeah, walk me through the palette.
So the lucky colors are gold, yellow, red, and blue.
Okay, gold and red are very classic Chinese luck colors, wealth and joy. Yellow is the imperial color, the color of the earth and the sun center.
And blue.
And blue. Blue is interesting. Blue represents water.
Which controls fire.
Exactly. Maybe the blue is there as a safety valve to keep the fire from burning everything down.
That's what I was thinking.
That makes sense. Feng shui-wise, you need a little bit of cooling.
But look at the avoid list. Avoid orange, green, and dark green.
That is specific. Green corresponds to the wood element.
And wood feeds fire.
So normally you'd think wood is good for fire. But in a Bingwu year, a double fire year, maybe the logic is that the fire's already too hot. You don't want to throw more logs on the bonfire. You don't want to overstimulate the system.
So avoiding green is about avoiding burnout. That is fascinating.
It suggests the danger this year isn't weakness, it's excess.
So visually, if you're dressing for the fire horse year, you want to look like a superhero. Gold, red, blue.
Wonder Woman colors. Exactly.
Leave the forest greens in the closet for the rabbit year.
Exactly.
Now, this next part completely threw me. The source lists lucky associated countries.
This list is wild. I spent some time trying to find the thread connecting these.
I'm just going to read it. South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, Mongolia, Romania, Colombia.
It's an eclectic mix, isn't it?
I mean, Mongolia, I get. Horses are central to Mongolian culture. The horse is the engine of the steppes. That feels like a spiritual home.
Absolutely. But look at the others. South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia.
They are all broadly in the global south or associated with high heat.
They are countries with intense solar energy. Countries that are often culturally associated with vibrancy, with yang, expression festivals, outdoor life, heat.
There's a map of summer energy.
I think so. Romania is the outlier geographically tucked into Eastern Europe.
Yeah, what's Romania doing there?
There might be a deeper astrological connection, possibly related to the founding dates of the modern state, or perhaps an ancient connection, the Dacian dragon wolf standard, the history of horsemanship on the Danube.
Oh, interesting.
Or it could be that Romania's specific elemental chart just resonates with the horse.
So if you're planning a vacation in 2026, maybe skip the Arctic and head to Rio or Bucharest.
Seems like the stars are recommending it.
Now I want to pivot to what I think is the biggest aha moment in this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We often say Chinese zodiac as a shorthand, but the source makes it very clear that this system isn't contained just within China.
No, and this is where the see also and the comparative data in the source really shine. This is a Pan-Asian and honestly Eurasian system.
Yeah.
It traveled the Silk Road, and as it traveled, it mutated. It adapted to the local environment.
It's like a game of telephone, but with animals. The structure, the 12-year cycle stays the same. The hardware is identical.
Right.
But the software, the specific animals in the slots, changes based on where you are.
Right. So for the horse, in Korean and Japanese zodiacs, the calendar largely aligns. They stick with the horse.
Okay.
Though, interestingly, there is some debate in those cultures about the goat versus sheep distinction for the next sign, but the horse is pretty stable there.
It's too important of an animal to swap out.
I think so.
Yeah.
But then you start moving into other territories and things get wild. The source has a table comparing the zodiac members. Let's look at Vietnam.
Vietnam is fascinating.
It is. They replaced the ox with the water buffalo, which makes total sense agrarian-wise.
Mm-hmm.
The water buffalo is the tractor of Vietnam. The ox is less central.
That makes sense. But the big change is the rabbit.
Yes.
They don't have a rabbit year.
No. In Vietnam, it's the year of the cat.
See, as a cat person, I feel like I missed out. Why the shift?
It's likely linguistic. The Chinese word for the rabbit branch is Mao.
Mao.
The Vietnamese word for cat is Mayo.
Oh.
It sounds very similar. Over centuries, the oral tradition likely shifted from Mao, rabbit, to Mio, cat.
That's wild.
And functionally, in a rice-growing culture, a cat who eats the rats that eat the rice is a hero. A rabbit is just a pest.
That makes total sense. So the zodiac adapts to what is valuable to the people.
Exactly.
Now let's look at the Kazakh and Kyrgyz zodiacs. This one made me laugh out loud.
I know exactly which one you're looking at.
The dragon. In the Chinese zodiac, the dragon is this majestic, mythical power beast. It's the only mythical creature in the lineup.
Right. It's the big one.
In Kazakh and Kyrgyz tradition, that slot is filled by
A snail.
a snail. How do you go from dragon, a fire-breathing flying serpent, to a snail?
It represents a fundamental shift in how the cycle is viewed. If you are on the step, maybe you don't need the mythology of the dragon. Maybe the snail represents the slow, inexorable spiral nature of time. Or maybe it's about the hard shell protection against the elements.
It is the ultimate downgrade in terms of cool factor, though. Happy Year of the Snail just doesn't have the same ring to it as Year of the Dragon.
It really doesn't. Yeah. But it reminds us that the symbol doesn't matter as much as the slot. The fifth slot exists. It has a certain energy. The culture fills it with what resonates.
Let's look at the Malay zodiac.
There, the rabbit is replaced by the mouse deer.
Which is adorable and very specific to that jungle environment.
And the pig is replaced by the tortoise.
Which changes the meaning entirely. The pig is usually wealth, abundance, maybe a little gluttony.
Right.
The tortoise is wisdom and longevity.
Exactly. So a pig year feels like a party. A tortoise year feels like a study session.
Huh. And in the Gurung tradition of Nepal,
the dragon becomes an eagle, which keeps the sky power connection but grounds it in a real animal.
Makes sense.
And the pig becomes a deer.
And then for the Turkic peoples, this covers groups like the Volga Bulgars. The rat is replaced by a camel.
Which makes perfect sense for the Silk Road context. A camel is a much more vital part of life than a rat.
For sure.
You don't survive the desert without a camel.
And the monkey is replaced by a hedgehog.
A hedgehog.
This is why I love digging into the source tables. You realize that while we are hyping up the fire horse, somewhere else, someone might be preparing for the year of the hedgehog or the snail.
It reminds us that these systems are living things. They aren't static. They evolve with the people who use them.
It's amazing.
Whether it's Persia using a whale or crocodile for the dragon slot, or Vietnam using the cat, the core truth is the cycle. Humans are trying to make sense of time by attaching it to the natural world. We are trying to find a rhythm.
So as we wrap this up and look toward Tuesday, February 17th, we've established the identity of this coming year.
Yes. Let's synthesize it. We are finishing the previous cycle, the year of the snake, and entering the domain of the horse.
Identify Ru.
It is the seventh station of the zodiac. It is ruled by fire. It is driven by yang energy. It is the season of high summer.
And historically, we are connecting with a tradition that goes back to Emperor Huangdi in 2637 BC, reinforced by Han Dynasty scholars and visualized by Tang Dynasty artists.
And we are sharing that moment with people in South Africa, Brazil, Mongolia, all those lucky countries.
It is a lot of energy to take in, but I think that's the point. The source data suggests this isn't a year for sitting still.
No. If the elements are fire and yang, the implication is action, preparation, brightness. It's about balancing.
So here is the thought I want to leave you with today. We talked about those Tang Dynasty statues, the human bodies with the animal heads.
Yes, the ministers of time.
I can't get that image out of my head. We tend to treat time as just a number. 2025 becomes 2026, just a counter clicking up on our phone screen.
Right.
But this system asks us to treat time as a character, to put on the mask.
That's a powerful distinction.
If we view time not just as a linear progression, but as a cycle of characteristics, if we accept that we are entering a room defined by fire and horse energy, how does that change your plans for next week?
It changes everything. You don't wear a parka to the beach. You don't bring yin quietness into a yang riot.
Exactly. Are you trying to hibernate in a year that wants you to sprint? Are you fighting the current?
Are you ready to keep pace?
Yeah.
Because the horse, by definition, moves. And with the fire element, it moves fast.
So sharpen your focus, wear your red and gold, maybe a little blue for balance, and get ready to run.
Saddle up.
Happy Year in the Fire Horse, everyone. The date drops on February 17th. Be ready.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you in the next cycle.
Take care.